The Cold War was a period of intense political and military tension between the Western powers led by the United States and the Eastern powers led by the Soviet Union. The roots of the Cold War can be traced back to the end of World War II, when the two sides emerged as the dominant global powers. The Cold War lasted for over 4 decades and had a profound impact on world events and international relations. This video will explore the causes of the Cold War and its consequences on a global scale. The origins of the Cold War can be traced back to the division of Europe and the world into 2 spheres of influence, one controlled by the US and the other by the Soviet Union. The events leading up to the Cold War also included World War II, which ended with defeat of Nazi Germany. The United States and Soviet Union were the main Allied powers during the war, and their cooperation during the war was limited. After the war, the two nations had different plans for the post-war world, and this led to tension and suspicion between them. The emergence of the bipolar world was another important factor leading up to the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Union were the only 2 superpowers in the world, and their main rivalry defined the international order for decades to come. The main causes of the Cold War can be traced back and blamed by the fundamental differences in ideology between the US and the Soviet Union. The US, with its capitalist economy and democratic government, stood in dark contrast to the Soviet Union with its communist government and centrally planned economy. These ideological differences led to economic and political competition between the two nations, as each sought to spread their respective systems throughout the world. Another major cause of the Cold War was the arms race. Both the US and the Soviet Union engaged in a massive build-up of military weapons and technology, leading to a dangerous escalation of tensions. The United States, concerned about the growing power of the Soviet Union and its expansion into Eastern Europe, implemented a policy of containment to limit its expansion. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, saw the US's actions as a threat to its security and responded by increasing its own military capabilities. Finally, the Cold War was also fueled by competition for resources and influence around the world. The United States and the Soviet Union both sought to gain control of key regions such as the Middle East and Africa, and to prevent the other from gaining too much influence. This competition led to proxy wars such as the Korean and the Vietnam War, and a constant state of tension between the 2 superpowers. The Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953, was one of the first major events of the Cold War. It was a result of division of Korea in 2 separate states, the Communist North and the Capitalist South, just after World War II. The North, backed by the Soviet Union and China, invaded the South in June 1950, in an attempt to reunite the country under communist rule. The United States and other UN member countries intervened on behalf of the South, while the Soviet Union and China supported the North. The war ended in a stalemate, with a ceasefire agreement signed and the country remaining divided to this day. Again, due to their ideological differences, the Vietnam War, which lasted from 55 to 75, was another major event of the Cold War. It was a result of the Communist North's attempt to reunify the country under its rule and the US's efforts to prevent the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. The US and other anti-communist countries intervened on behalf of the South, whilst the North was supported by the Soviet Union and China. The war resulted in a devastating defeat for the US and its allies, and the eventual reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. In what can be seen as the closest the world has ever came to nuclear war since World War II, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was another huge event of the Cold War. The crisis was sparked by the discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States. President John F. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade of the island to prevent the delivery of more nuclear missiles and ordered the removal of the existing ones. The Soviet Union refused, and tensions between the 2 superpowers escalated to the brink of nuclear war. However, the crisis was ultimately resolved peacefully, with the Soviet Union agreeing to remove the missiles in exchange for a US promise not to invade Cuba and the removal of US missiles from Turkey. The Cold War also had a significant impact on the field of space exploration. both the United States and the Soviet Union saw the potential for space as a way to demonstrate their technological superiority and military right over the other. This led to the famous space race between the two nations, with each one trying to outdo the other in terms of space achievements. The United States' launch of the satellite Explorer 1 in 1958 and the Soviet Union's launch of the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space in 1961 were just a few of the major milestones in this competition. The Cold War space race ultimately led to advancements in rocket technology and satellite development, which have had a lasting impact on modern communications and navigation systems. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union began to experience economic and political turmoil. The arms race and the costly involvement in the war in Afghanistan had placed a strain on the Soviet economy. Additionally, Soviet leader Gorbachev's policies of glasnost, which aims to increase transparency, and the restructuring in the government led to increased dissent and demands for greater political freedoms. In 1989, a series of revolutions swept across Eastern Europe, leading to the fall of communist governments in countries such as Poland, Hungary, and East Germany. The most significant event was the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989, which symbolised the end of the division in Germany and the end of Soviet control in Eastern Europe. In 1991, a failed coup attempt against Gorbachev led to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the independence of the republics that made it up. The end of the Cold War marked the end of a decades-long struggle between the US and the Union for global dominance and ushered a new era of international relations. The legacy of the Cold War continues to shape the world we live in today. The end of the Cold War marked the beginning of a new era in international relations, with the United States and Russia no longer locked in a nuclear standoff. The collapse of the Soviet Union also led to the rise of new global powers such as China and India, which have had a significant impact on the global economy and implementing international policy. The arms race that characterised the Cold War also had a lasting impact, with many countries still investing heavily in military technology and weapons. The Cold War also had a significant impact on domestic policy, with the rise of military-industrial complex and the increased surveillance of citizens. The Cold War also solidified the United States as a superpower and established a new world order, with the US as a dominant force in international relations. However, the Cold War also had a negative impact on the world, as it led to numerous conflicts, human rights violations, and the destabilization of certain regions. Overall, the Cold War had a profound and lasting impact on the world, shaping the way we understand and engage with international politics, the global economy, and society today.